Welcome to The Dark Side with Verity, a podcast where we dive into all the real and raw transformations made possible through breathwork. We all have a dark side, but it doesn't need to be heavy. And this is why we share stories to bring in the lightness, to lift the load, so that we can all feel a little less alone and know that our stuff doesn't define us. And we move through this lifetime with more ease and grace. Let's dive right in. Welcome back to another episode of The Dark Side with Verity. I recently watched a certified facilitator run a breathwork session. Within 15 minutes, 3 people in the room had full tetany, hands were clawed, jaw locked, one woman was crying and shaking, and the facilitator told her, and I'm quoting, "Stay with it, this is trauma leaving." It wasn't trauma leaving, it was respiratory alkalosis, it was CO2 crash. It was a nervous system in freeze response being told to push harder. And the woman holding the room had a certificate on her wall. This is the episode I generally try and avoid with all of my heart. However, it's here. So let's take a breath. This is going to be a big one for me. It's not generally in alignment with how I come forward. I'm more about being positive and sharing what really works in this industry, but sometimes I'm going there. So close your eyes. Let's go. Big breath. Sigh it out. Okay, let's do this. I run Vidya. It's a 14-phase breathwork certification to become a facilitator. I have an app, a mentorship for practitioners that are building a business that actually holds. Today, we're talking about the elephant in the wellness room. The certification industry is, look, I can't even say it's broken because it's not even here. We are so new, although it feels we've been doing this for 7 years, it's still so new in the world. So while it's not broken, it never was. People are getting hurt and most people are teaching this work don't actually know enough to know what they don't know. When you've done lots of work, you know you don't know lots. You're never going to. What is really important to know is how to hold safe space. Cohort 1 of Vidya certification closes, on the 31st at midnight. I'll get into that later at the end. But first, the why. Let's break down what a weekend breathwork certification actually contains. And I'm not making this up. These are real curriculums from real schools selling real certificates for between $2,000 and $5,000. Day 1, history of breathwork. Bit of pranayama, you do a session, you cry, you feel transformed. Woo! You think you understand breathwork. Day 2, you learn the active breath pattern, usually some version of a 2-stage pranayama or conscious connected breathing. You practice on each other, you do another session, you feel even more transformed. Day 3, business basics, how to run a class, how to price, how to do some marketing, how to get your certificate. You go home a facilitator. That's it. Here's what's not in that weekend: CO2 tolerance and how to read it in the body, polyvagal theory, how to identify dorsal vagal shutdown versus sympathetic activation in real time, contradictions, who should never do this work, trauma-informed scope of practice, what to do when someone dissociates, what to do when someone has a flashback, what to do when someone has a seizure. Yes, that happens. What to do when your client is left in an open loop after their session. Heart rate variability, vagal tone, the difference between a stress response and a trauma response, how to iterate intensity, how to ground someone back into ventral vagal safety, how to close a session properly so people don't leave the room dysregulated and drive home in a frozen, numb, frozen state. None of that is in a weekend, unless maybe something pops up and they have to deal with it. I'm not saying it's not possible. I haven't seen it learnt in a weekend because it's not how The brain learns a clinical skill. This happens in so many industries. Like when a building boom happens, people are like, well, price of property is going up. They quickly build all these homes and people are left with uncoded homes, especially in the territory. There was a huge boom 10, 12 years ago. And now people are left with having to sort out these homes that weren't built properly. Same. The industries get greedy. Breathwork blew up. After Wim Hof, after Huberman, after the whole nervous system conversation went mainstream, everybody wanted in. And I get it. I was like, what is this? And then a handful of training schools just decided they could turn this into a 3-day intensive and charge nearly the same amount. So they did it. Look, good on them. If it worked for their marketing and they made enough money to now support people through the rest of the process, great. If they have left people off to their own devices in a open loop state, not great. So the people buying these certificates aren't stupid. They're just under-resourced because you don't know what you don't know. And if that's all you've been taught in a certificate, you think you're good until something happens in a session and you panic or you freak out. So people who want to leave their corporate job, they want to do meaningful work, they trusted the brand, they trusted the person, they trusted the marketing. I am the biggest sucker for marketing. I believe everyone. I've wasted thousands of dollars because people are really good at selling to me. I would much rather over-deliver than under-deliver. It's not the case for everybody. I continue to learn the hard way. Fine. I'd rather be a trusting human. The whole point of the training is to run a safe session. But you don't know that until you're in the deep end if you're not taught that at the start. So they pay, get a certificate, they post an announcement on Instagram, they start running sessions, and that's when people can get hurt. I'm not being dramatic. I've personally worked with people in the last 18 months who've called me after a bad experience in someone else's sessions. One had panic attacks so severe. One, it re-traumatized her entire body of something that no woman should ever have to go through twice. It left her dissociated for days. One had activations they're just not prepared for, didn't understand. They weren't. And even when it happens in a session, they weren't supported after. These aren't just random cases. This is happening every week. And that's what terrifies me. That's why I'm making this. What a real certification needs to look like, from my point of view, my perspective, is you're walking through phases. So you have a benchmark. So you have an understanding of what it feels like in your body, what safety feels like. Because a lot of people don't even know what safety feels like in their own body. So phase 1, you need to understand your own nervous system. Before you facilitate anyone else, you need to be able to regulate yourself. You need to be able to map out your own activation patterns. You do the work you're going to ask others to do. Months of personal practice is required before you even hold a room. Because in 4 days, do you think everything is going to come up? It's not. It's probably when you leave the space and you go home to your own devices that everything rears its head. Important. Phase 2, you need to understand the respiratory science, the actual biology of what's happening. It is important when you show up. You can speak on every aspect of this practice. You are the facilitator. You are teaching. You are holding space. So you need to know CO2 tolerance, oxygen, hemoglobin dissociation, why hyperventilation produces tetany, why overbreathing reduces oxygen, what happens in the brain state, what happens in your body and your blood. You need to know this. Because this is where science and spirituality meet. This is where people can understand their power. Because you'll have people that don't believe in energy. You'll have people that don't really understand science. You need to bring the two together for them. so that they get it and it clicks. You need to understand polyvagal theory. You need to understand a trauma-informed practice. You need to know breath patterns. And I'm not saying one. You need to have a huge toolkit because, like I've said in the previous podcast and many times before, every person will come to you with a different nervous system state of where they're at. It is your job, your role to identify that. And why pushing someone past their limit is not healthy for them. So all of these tools and breath practices will also become integration tools for your clients. And you need to have more than just breath techniques. You really bossy here. You need to understand somatic release, how the body holds activation, how to support release without forcing it, trauma release exercises, shaking, sound. You need to understand meridian lines. You need to understand a yin practice in the body because the breath sits inside a wider energetic system and you can't separate them cleanly. Oh, don't worry about that. You need to know everything. You need to understand yoga nidra, the ventral states, how to bring people into deep rest, how to actually close a session so that they leave loop closed. You're dealing with someone's subconscious in this space, in hypnosis. You need to be very careful when you're working with this. There needs to be complete screening when you're working with clients. Who should never do this work? Pregnant, epilepsy. You need to know psychosis history, when to refer out. You need to understand how to facilitate one-on-one, online in person, and group. A group is more than one. It's a whole different practice. The mechanics of the room, of how you are holding space. You need to understand the whole business aspect because when you start running your own business, you're not just teaching breathwork. You are marketing. You are doing the books. You are admin. You are everything at the beginning. It's why I created Business Builders because that took me years and I would have loved somebody else to just be like, here is your whole business for you, wrapped up in a beautiful little bow, change your logos and you're good to go. So within 48 hours, your business can be up and running. Then all of your integration tools. You need to be teaching weekly. It's the only way you're going to show up without, I hate this word too, imposter syndrome. You do it so much. I mean, you can be coached for months about a visibility wound. It's not going to change the fact you still have to do it. You still have to show up every week. I've created mine in phases. There's 14 of them. It may take you 14 weeks. It may take you 6 months. It may take you a year. What's important is that you do the work first. The benefits of this job. And I know, I'm going to put this out there. If you're someone listening and you have done a weekend certificate, I'm not telling you you're bad or you don't know what you're doing. I'm telling you you're probably sold something that is incomplete. So the honest move isn't to defend the certificate. It's just to ask yourself, do I actually know what I'm doing? Do I feel safe enough holding this space? If things go wrong, can I identify a shutdown across a room of 20 people? You should not be facilitating a room of 20 people on your own, by the way. Do I know how to spot pre-tetany before it happens? Do I know when to stop a session? People can pay for an hour session, but if you don't have the discernment to stop when they need to, it's not about time. It's about transformation. Do you know how to ground someone when they've relived a horrible experience? Do you know how to say no to a client? If any of that gave you a tight feeling in your chest, that's just information for your body. Doesn't mean you need to stop. It just means perhaps you need to train a little bit more. Perhaps you need to spend more time breathing yourself to understand what it feels like in your body, doing different practices. Perhaps you just need to get into a program that actually teaches you the science, the safety, and the scope. The worst thing you can do is pretend that you know. I will always be the first person to say I don't know because people get hurt in this industry if you don't own your own shit. So Vidya certification is for people who want to do this properly. It's for the coach who's adding breathwork into sessions, you will thank me later, and feels something is missing. It's for the yoga teacher who wants to hold deeper work and get paid more. It's for the burnt out professional leaving the corporate world to do something that actually means something for them. It's for the mum building their income and identity around healing work and being able to look after their kids. It's for the seeker who's done their own work and wants to turn it into a career. It's for someone who is going through a tough time and wants to understand it all and perhaps become a facilitator afterwards because you know what it feels like, because you now have all the tools. It's not for someone looking for the fastest certificate. We are not that. It's 14 phases. It's online. It is live components twice weekly. It's the most rigorous program in this space because I know how important this work is. So if you've been listening and something has landed, of course, we want you in our community sharing this practice safely. Send us a message, DM, email, have a beautiful cohort of people who are safely facilitating. And if you're one of them, come in. Have the best day. Live happily and breathe safely. Ciao. That is a wrap. The Dark Side with Verity. Thank you for joining and being here to support our guests as they move, shift, and share through real transformation, sharing their stories from the darkest of places, allowing you to see their light. This is where the change will happen. You know the drill. Like, share, chat about it, connect with us. We're here for more, and you know it.